My name's Rachel, and I've been working as a part-time caregiver for a few years now. A couple of months ago, I was assigned to look after an elderly gentleman named Walter. He was 82, sharp as a tack, and honestly, one of the kindest people I've ever met. We bonded pretty quickly. I mean, he loved reminiscing about his adventures when he was younger and had a wicked sense of humor. He also treated me with a level of respect I wasn't used to in this line of work. But Walter's family? That was a whole different story. His daughter, Karen, yeah, her actual name, no joke, would swing by occasionally, and let's just say she had major main character energy. She was rude, demanding, and constantly dismissive of me. Once, she even accused me of stealing her dad's watch, which, of course, turned up under a couch cushion later. No apology, just a smug. Well, maybe you should have cleaned better. Walter, bless him, didn't seem too thrilled with her visits either. He'd roll his eyes the moment she walked in and mutter things like, "Here comes the parade." I got the sense there was a lot of tension between them, but I didn't pry. It wasn't my business. Still, the whole situation felt weird. Karen kept insisting she was in charge of Walter's affairs, even though he was completely independent. She'd talk about selling his house someday soon, or streamlining his estate. It always felt a bit predatory, for lack of a better word. But again, not my place. I just did my job and focused on Walter. Then, a couple of weeks ago, everything changed. And not in the way I expected. Okay, so fast forward to a couple of months after I stopped working for Walter. My assignment ended because he had a fall, not on my watch, and decided to move into an assisted living facility where he could have round-the-clock care. I was sad to see him go, but we parted on good terms. He even gave me a handwritten note that said, "Thanks for making an old man laugh again." I still have it tucked away in my desk. Anyway, life went on, and I honestly didn't think much about Walter until I got a letter in the mail. At first, I thought it was a bill or junk mail because who gets actual letters anymore? But when I opened it, my jaw hit the floor. It was from a law firm, informing me that Walter had passed away peacefully in his sleep, and I was being named in his will. I thought it had to be a mistake. Like, what? I'm just the caregiver. Why would he leave me anything? But then I remembered how sweet he'd been, and how he often said I was family in a way. Still, I didn't know what being in the will meant. Was it sentimental like a photo album? Or financial? I was too stunned to process it. The letter included an invitation to a reading of the will, and when I showed up at the lawyer's office, I felt completely out of place. Karen and her husband, some corporate-looking guy named Todd, were already there, shooting me death stares. Karen didn't even wait for the lawyer to start before snapping. "What's she doing here?" I awkwardly explained that I got the same letter as them. Karen rolled her eyes, so hard I thought she'd dislocate something, muttering, "This is ridiculous." When the lawyer began reading the will, things got wild. Walter had left Karen and Todd most of his estate, his house, stocks, the usual rich people stuff. But then came the bombshell. He left me $100,000. Let me say that again. $100,000. I couldn't believe it. I think I blacked out for a second. Meanwhile, Karen lost her absolute mind. She stood up, slammed her hands on the table, and started yelling about how I must have manipulated her father. The lawyer calmly reminded her that Walter was of sound mind when he wrote the will, but she wasn't having it. She even accused me of seducing him. Yeah, she actually said that. I nearly choked on my own spit. I didn't know what to say or how to defend myself. I just sat there, stunned, as Karen stormed out, yelling, "This isn't over." Spoiler alert, it definitely wasn't over. After the will reading, I thought I'd seen the worst of it. I mean, how much more drama could Karen possibly stir up? Spoiler a lot. I hadn't even processed the idea of the money yet when Karen started blowing up my phone. At first, it was just angry voicemails, which I ignored. But then she showed up. At my house. Picture this. I'm in sweatpants, binge-watching some trashy reality TV, and there's a furious Karen banging on my front door like she's the police. I didn't want to let her in, but she was yelling loud enough to alert the whole neighborhood. So, reluctantly, I opened the door. Big mistake. She shoved her way inside, all huffy, and launched into this tirade about how I took advantage of her father. She accused me of planting ideas in his head, of somehow tricking him into giving me the money. I told her, calmly at first, that I didn't even know I was in the will until I got the letter. But Karen wasn't buying it. "You must have done something to him," she spat, pacing my tiny living room like a caged tiger. "He was my father, not yours. Do you think you deserve that money more than his own family?" I wanted to yell back, but honestly, I was still reeling from everything. Instead, I just stood there, dumbfounded, while she kept going. At one point, she even said, "What were you doing, Rachel? Playing nurse by day and mistress by night." That one hit like a slap in the face. I was mortified. For the record, nothing even remotely inappropriate ever happened between me and Walter. He was like a grandparent figure to me, for crying out loud. But Karen clearly didn't care about the truth. She just needed someone to blame. Finally, I snapped. "You think I asked for this? You think I knew? I was just doing my job, Karen. Your dad was kind to me, and maybe if you'd treated him half as well, he wouldn't have felt the need to include me in his will." Probably not my most diplomatic moment, but I was over it. Karen froze, her face a mix of shock and rage, and then stormed out without another word. I was shaking by the time the door slammed behind her. I wanted to cry, scream, or maybe both. Instead, I just stood there in silence, trying to wrap my head around what had just happened. Little did I know, this was just Karen warming up. After Karen's little home invasion, I thought that would be the end of it, like maybe she just needed to blow off steam. But nope. Karen was just getting started. A couple of days later, I got a call from the lawyer handling Walter's estate. Apparently, Karen had filed some sort of challenge to the will, claiming undue influence. Basically, she was accusing me of manipulating Walter into leaving me the money. I couldn't believe it. It felt surreal, like something out of a bad courtroom drama. The lawyer assured me that Walter's will was airtight. He'd updated it with full legal oversight, and there was no evidence to support her claim. Still, just hearing that she was trying to paint me as some sort of gold-digging villain made my stomach churn. And then it got worse. Karen started spreading rumors about me around town. I live in a smallish community where word travels fast, and before I knew it, people were giving me looks at the grocery store. I even overheard someone whispering about how I seduced an old man for his money. It was humiliating. I tried to keep my head down and focus on work, but Karen wasn't done. She started showing up at the assisted living facility where Walter had spent his final months, trying to dig up dirt on me. She cornered one of my former coworkers and asked if they'd ever seen anything inappropriate between me and Walter. Spoiler, they hadn't because there wasn't anything to see. Thankfully, most of the staff had my back and told her to leave. Then came the real kicker. One morning, I woke up to find a Facebook post from Karen. She'd written this long, dramatic rant about how her dear father had been taken advantage of by a greedy caregiver. She didn't name me outright, but it was obvious who she was talking about. The comments were a mix of people agreeing with her and others calling her out for being ridiculous. One person even said, "Sounds like your dad made his own decisions. Maybe you should respect that." That comment gave me life, but the whole situation was exhausting. I felt like I was living in a nightmare where I couldn't defend myself without looking guilty. The money hadn't even hit my account yet, and it already felt like it wasn't worth the headache. But then something unexpected happened. Karen's lies started to unravel. So, here's where things took a turn I really didn't see coming. Karen's relentless smear campaign was starting to wear me down, and I was seriously considering just walking away from the inheritance altogether. It wasn't like I'd asked for any of this. But before I could even think about making a move, karma stepped in. A few days after Karen's Facebook rant, I got a call from one of Walter's old friends, a retired attorney named Jim. I'd met him a few times when I was taking care of Walter, and he'd always been friendly. Apparently, Jim had seen Karen's post and wasn't thrilled about it. He told me, "Walter would be rolling in his grave if he knew what she was doing to you." Then Jim dropped a bombshell. He said Karen had a history of lying and manipulating people, even Walter. He'd been witness to several instances where Karen tried to get Walter to change his will, once when he was recovering from surgery and clearly wasn't in the right state of mind. Walter had confided in Jim that he didn't trust Karen with his money because she had a tendency to blow through cash like it was Monopoly money. Jim also mentioned something else. Walter had made an audio recording when he updated his will. He wanted to make sure there was a record of him explaining, in his own words, why he was making the decisions he did. And get this, Jim had a copy. The next day, Jim emailed me the recording. My hands were shaking as I hit play, and hearing Walter's voice again brought tears to my eyes. In the recording, Walter explained that he was leaving Karen the bulk of his estate because she was his only daughter, but he was giving me the $100,000 as a thank you for the care and kindness I'd shown him during a difficult time. He said, "Rachel reminded me that there are good people in this world who do things out of the kindness of their hearts, not for personal gain." It was overwhelming to hear, but it also felt like a lifeline. I finally had proof that Karen's accusations were baseless. I sent the recording to the lawyer handling Walter's estate, and he assured me it would put an end to Karen's challenge. But it didn't stop there. Apparently, the lawyer had had enough of Karen's antics, and he decided to dig a little deeper into her behavior. What he found was chef's kiss perfect. Karen had been siphoning money from one of Walter's accounts for months before his death. She tried to cover her tracks, but the lawyer found the evidence and was preparing to report it to the authorities. When I heard this, I was equal parts shocked and vindicated. All this time, she'd been accusing me of manipulation while she was the one stealing from her own father. The irony was almost too much to handle. And the fallout? Oh, it was glorious. When the lawyer confronted Karen with the evidence of her stealing from Walter's account, I heard she completely lost it. She tried to claim it was all a misunderstanding, that she was just managing funds on her dad's behalf. But the records were damning. Large, regular withdrawals were made directly into her personal account, and they had no connection to Walter's expenses. The lawyer wasn't buying her excuses, and from what I understand, he made it very clear that she could face criminal charges if she didn't back off. Karen went radio silent after that. No more voicemails, no surprise visits, and thankfully, no more Facebook rants. For the first time in weeks, I felt like I could breathe again. But that wasn't the end of it. Word about Karen's theft started to spread. Jim, Walter's old friend, wasn't exactly discreet, and soon the local gossip mill kicked into high gear. People started seeing Karen in a new light, and let's just say it wasn't flattering. The same neighbors who had whispered about me were now whispering about her. A few even reached out to apologize for believing her lies, which was a nice change of pace. Then came the cherry on top. Karen's husband, Todd, filed for divorce. Apparently, he'd had enough of her drama and didn't want to be associated with the mess she'd created. Rumor has it he found out about the stolen money and decided to bail before things got worse. I can't say I blame him. Meanwhile, the lawyer finalized the estate, and the $100,000 was officially transferred into my account. I wish I could say I felt nothing but relief, but honestly, it was complicated. On the one hand, I was grateful to Walter and relieved that the truth had come out. On the other hand, the whole ordeal left me feeling drained and a little jaded. I'd never been in a position where people assumed the worst about me, and it wasn't an experience I wanted to repeat. But the biggest shock came when I got a letter from Karen. Handwritten, no less. I almost didn't open it, but curiosity got the better of me. In the letter, she apologized, not sincerely, but in that fake, "I'm doing this because I have to" kind of way. She claimed she was going through a hard time and lashed out at me because she didn't know how else to process her grief. She ended with, "I hope you do the right thing with the money." The audacity.
I didn't respond.
There was nothing to say to someone who could twist their own actions into some warped version of victimhood. By that point, I decided to focus on what really mattered, honoring Walter's memory and figuring out how to move forward. With the $100,000 sitting in my account, I felt a mix of gratitude and responsibility. Walter had trusted me enough to leave me this money, and I wanted to use it in a way that would honor his memory. But before I could make any big decisions, I needed to take a step back and reflect on everything that had happened. First, I took a much-needed mental health break. I booked a short trip to the mountains, just me, a cozy cabin, and a pile of books. No drama, no social media, no Karen. It was exactly what I needed to clear my head. During those few days, I thought a lot about what Walter meant to me and what he'd said in that recording about my kindness reminding him of the good in the world. That stuck with me. When I got back, I made a plan. I decided to split the money into 3 parts. Paying it forward, I set aside $25,000 to donate to a local nonprofit that supports elderly people in need. Walter had mentioned more than once how lucky he was to afford good care, and I knew he'd want to help others who weren't as fortunate. Investing in myself, another $50,000 went toward my education. I'd always dreamed of becoming a nurse, and this felt like the perfect opportunity to make it happen. I enrolled in a nursing program, and for the first time in a long time, I felt excited about my future. Savings and emergency fund. The remaining $25,000 went into a savings account. After everything I'd been through, having a safety net felt like a huge weight off my shoulders. Meanwhile, Karen was still floundering. The last I heard, the lawyer had officially reported her theft to the authorities. I don't know if she'll face jail time or just a hefty fine, but either way, she's got some serious consequences coming her way. Part of me felt vindicated, but mostly I just wanted to move on and leave her toxicity behind. As for Walter's legacy, I decided to keep a small, framed photo of him on my desk, just a simple reminder of the man who saw something in me worth supporting. It's funny how someone can come into your life for such a short time and leave such a lasting impact. But here's the most unexpected part. Karen's husband, Todd, reached out to me. He apologized for everything and even offered to help me with anything legal or financial. I was wary at first, but he seemed genuinely decent, probably the only sane one in that family. We're not exactly friends, but it was nice to hear someone else acknowledge how out of line Karen had been. As life started to settle down, I had a lot of time to reflect on everything that had happened. It was such a whirlwind of unexpected events, from finding out about the will to dealing with Karen's insanity. If you told me a year ago that I'd be accused of seducing an old man and inherit a small fortune, I would have laughed in your face. But here we are. Through it all, I learned some pretty valuable lessons. If anyone ever finds themselves in a similar situation, though I hope you don't, here's my advice. Document everything. One thing that saved me was the fact that Walter's will was solid and well documented. If you're in a situation where someone trusts you with their care or their money, make sure everything is above board. Having that audio recording of Walter explaining his decisions was a game changer. Don't let lies define you. When Karen started spreading rumors, I felt like the whole world was against me. It's hard not to internalize that kind of negativity, but in the end, the truth came out, and the people who mattered saw the real story. If you know you're in the right, hold your ground. Take control of the narrative. When Karen started her smear campaign, I initially tried to ignore it, hoping it would blow over. Looking back, I wish I'd been more proactive in defending myself. Letting people believe lies can do more damage than speaking up. Kindness matters. Walter's decision to leave me the money wasn't about anything extraordinary I did. It was about small acts of kindness that made him feel cared for. It reminded me that how we treat people, even in seemingly mundane moments, can have a profound impact. Set boundaries. Karen's behavior was beyond unacceptable, and I regret not standing up to her sooner. It's important to know when to draw the line and protect yourself, even if it feels uncomfortable. As for Karen, I've chosen not to dwell on her anymore. Let her deal with her mess. I'm done giving her space in my head. I'm also learning to be okay with the fact that people will think what they want. Some folks in my community still believe Karen's version of events, and that's their prerogative. I know the truth, and the people who matter most know it too. That's enough for me. But the biggest takeaway? Life is unpredictable. One moment you're going about your routine, and the next you're thrust into some wild drama you never saw coming. You can't control what happens, but you can control how you respond. So, after the storm settled, I threw myself into my new life with a fresh sense of purpose. Starting the nursing program was a huge step, but it felt right. Walter always said I had a knack for caring for people, and I wanted to channel that into something meaningful. The money he left me was a blessing, but I saw it as a springboard, not a safety net. The first few weeks of classes were intimidating. I hadn't been in school for years, and I worried I wouldn't keep up. But it turned out that working as a caregiver had prepared me more than I realized. I already knew how to handle high-stress situations, empathize with patients, and manage difficult personalities. Thanks, Karen. I also made a few new friends in the program, which was a welcome change after feeling so isolated during the whole Karen saga. One of them, Emily, became my study buddy, and we'd spend hours quizzing each other over coffee. It felt good to focus on something positive and build new connections. In the background, Karen's fallout continued to unfold. I learned through the grapevine that she'd been slapped with a hefty fine for the stolen money. She avoided jail time, but her reputation in town was thoroughly trashed. Todd's divorce was moving forward, and from what I heard, he wasn't being generous with the settlement. I didn't feel bad for her. She'd made her bed, and now she had to lie in it. Meanwhile, I decided to do something special with Walter's memory. I used a small portion of the money to set up a scholarship fund at a local community college for students going into healthcare. I named it the Walter Emerson Kindness Scholarship. It felt like the perfect way to honor him and his belief in helping others. When the first recipient sent me a thank you note, I cried like a baby. It was one of those rare moments where everything felt full circle. Despite the drama, I realized how much Walter's gesture had changed my life. Not just financially, but emotionally. It reminded me of the power of kindness and the importance of leaving something good behind when we go. I hoped that, in some small way, I could pay forward the trust and generosity he'd shown me. As I continued with my nursing program, the Walter Emerson Kindness Scholarship became one of the most fulfilling parts of my life. Every semester, I'd get a report from the community college about the students who were benefiting from it. Most of them came from humble backgrounds and had stories that reminded me a lot of myself, people just trying to make something better out of their lives. One student, Jessica, wrote me a letter that really stuck with me. She was a single mom working 2 jobs to make ends meet, and the scholarship allowed her to cut back her hours and focus on school. She wrote, "I don't know who Walter Emerson was, but I think he must have been a wonderful person because this scholarship is changing my life. Thank you for believing in people like me." I pinned that letter on my corkboard, right next to the handwritten note Walter gave me. It felt like proof that something good had come out of all the chaos. As for my nursing journey, it wasn't easy, but it was worth it. The long nights of studying and clinical rotations were exhausting, but they gave me a sense of purpose I hadn't felt in years. Every time I helped a patient or learned a new skill, I thought of Walter. I even started volunteering at a hospice on the weekends, a way to give back to the elderly community that had taught me so much. Karen, meanwhile, faded into the background. The last I heard, she was still in town but keeping a low profile. Occasionally, I'd see her at the grocery store or around town, but she'd avoid eye contact and scurry away. I didn't mind. Letting her live her life while I focused on mine was the best revenge. But then something unexpected happened. Todd, Karen's soon-to-be ex-husband, reached out again. This time, it wasn't about legal matters, it was to thank me. He told me that seeing how I'd handled the situation with dignity and kindness had inspired him to make some changes in his own life. He started volunteering at a local shelter and said he felt like he was finally living for something beyond himself. It was a strange, full-circle moment. The man who had once been part of Karen's toxic orbit was now finding his own way to pay it forward. It made me realize just how far the ripple effects of one person's kindness could reach. As I got closer to finishing my nursing program, I started thinking about what life would look like after graduation. For so long, it felt like my life was in survival mode, just trying to get through one challenge after another. But now, I had options. Opportunities. That realization was both thrilling and terrifying. One of my professors, Dr. Patel, pulled me aside after class one day and told me I had a knack for palliative care. She said my ability to connect with patients, especially those nearing the end of their lives, was rare. "It's not just about medical knowledge," she said. "It's about compassion. You've got that in spades." Her words stuck with me. I'd already been thinking about how much I enjoyed my volunteer work at the hospice, and her encouragement felt like a sign. After graduation, I decided to specialize in hospice and palliative care. It wasn't the most glamorous field, but it was meaningful, and I knew Walter would have approved. Around this time, the scholarship fund started to gain attention in the community. The college hosted a small ceremony to recognize donors, and they invited me to speak. Public speaking is not my thing, but I figured this was too important to shy away from. I kept it simple, just a story about Walter and how much he'd impacted my life. By the end, there wasn't a dry eye in the room. Even I got a little choked up, which is saying something because I hate crying in public. After the ceremony, a woman approached me with her teenage daughter. She said, "Hearing your story gives me hope for my daughter. She's thinking about going into healthcare, and seeing someone like you makes it feel possible." That moment reminded me why I started the scholarship in the first place. It wasn't just about honoring Walter, it was about creating ripples of kindness that could change lives. And speaking of lives changing, mine kept evolving in ways I never expected. Emily, my study buddy, became one of my closest friends. She was the one who convinced me to start dating again after years of being single. I was hesitant at first. I mean, who has time for romance when you're trying to rebuild your life? But she introduced me to her cousin, a paramedic named Mike, and, well, let's just say sparks flew. Mike was everything Karen wasn't. Kind, supportive, and completely drama-free. On our third date, I told him the whole Walter story, half expecting him to run for the hills. Instead, he just said, "That's incredible. You must have made a huge impact on his life." For the first time in ages, I felt like someone saw me for who I really was. Things with Mike moved slower than I expected, but honestly, that was exactly what I needed. After all the chaos with Karen and Walter's estate, I was done with drama. Mike was calm, grounded, and, best of all, completely unfazed by my backstory. We started spending more time together, and I quickly realized how much we had in common. Our love for helping others, our shared appreciation for bad puns, and our mutual dislike of pineapple on pizza. Don't come for me, pineapple pizza lovers. As my nursing program wrapped up, Mike and I became inseparable. He'd swing by after his paramedic shifts, sometimes bringing coffee or takeout, and we'd talk for hours about our jobs. His stories about saving lives on the front lines were both harrowing and inspiring. It felt good to be with someone who understood the emotional weight of working in healthcare. One evening, while we were watching some ridiculous reality show, he turned to me and said, "You know, Rachel, you're kind of amazing." I laughed, thinking he was joking, but he continued, "Seriously. Most people would have folded under what you went through. You turned it into something good. That's rare." That was one of the first times I felt like someone really saw the whole picture, everything I'd been through, and everything I was trying to build. It was scary and comforting at the same time. As for my career, things finally fell into place. After graduation, I was offered a position at a hospice facility near town. It felt like coming full circle, starting a job that aligned with Walter's values and my own. On my first day, I brought a small photo of Walter to keep at my desk. It was my way of carrying his legacy with me into this new chapter. The scholarship fund also continued to grow. After the ceremony, a few local businesses stepped up to contribute, and we were able to expand the number of recipients. Seeing how many lives it was touching made all the drama with Karen feel like a distant memory. In fact, I hadn't heard from her in months, which was fine by me. Life was finally feeling stable again, but then Mike dropped another surprise. One night, while we were sitting on my porch, he pulled out a tiny box. I immediately froze, thinking, no way. This is too soon. But instead of a ring, it was a key. "Move in with me," he said, grinning. "I mean, only if you're ready. No pressure." I didn't even hesitate. After everything I'd been through, I knew what it felt like to be stuck in toxic situations. With Mike, it was the opposite. He felt like home. Moving in with Mike was the final piece of the puzzle. It was a leap, sure, but one that felt right. His little house was cozy, tucked away in a quiet neighborhood, with a big backyard that we jokingly called the jungle because neither of us had time to keep it up. It was a far cry from the chaos I'd left behind with Karen, and for the first time in a long time, I felt truly at peace. As I settled into this new phase of my life, I started to reflect on how far I'd come. A year ago, I was just a caregiver doing my best to make ends meet. I never imagined that one kind man and a whirlwind of unexpected events would completely change my life. Walter's gift wasn't just financial. It was a lesson in generosity, resilience, and the power of kindness to create ripples far beyond what we can see. The scholarship fund continued to grow, and every semester, I'd get updates from the college about the students it was helping. One of the recipients, a young man named David, reached out to me personally. He'd been on the verge of dropping out when he got the scholarship, and now he was working as a nurse in the local ER. "I hope I can do for others what this scholarship did for me," he wrote. That hit me right in the heart. Walter's legacy was alive and thriving, and it felt amazing to know I had played a small part in that. As for Karen, she's still in town, as far as I know, but I've made peace with her existence. I don't waste energy being angry anymore. If anything, I feel a little sorry for her. She was so focused on controlling Walter's legacy that she completely missed what he was trying to teach her about love and generosity. That's her loss, not mine. Mike and I are thriving. We've talked about starting a family someday, but for now, we're happy building our life together. He's incredibly supportive of my career, and I've started to support him in his own community projects, like organizing CPR training workshops. It feels good to be in a partnership where we're lifting each other up. One night, as we were sitting on the porch, I told Mike, "I think Walter would have liked you." Mike smiled and said, "I think Walter would have liked you." He clearly had great taste. Looking back, the chaos with Karen, the inheritance, and the scrutiny from the community all seemed like a strange, exhausting detour in my life's journey. But I wouldn't change any of it. It taught me to stand up for myself, to trust in the kindness I give to others, and to keep pushing forward even when the odds feel stacked against me. So, to anyone who might be going through something similar, here's my advice. Be kind, even when it's hard. Stand your ground when you know you're in the right. And never underestimate the impact of small, good deeds. They might just change someone's life, including your own. Thank you, Walter, for everything. I hope I'm making you proud.